Okay, welcome back, everyone. Hopefully you had a little bit of a stretch. We're ready to begin our panel discussion, and I'm pleased to introduce our moderator. Mr. Sean Egan is a lawyer, and he's also Deputy Director of Labor for the Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity. Take it away, Sean.
Thank you, Sagar. Thank you all for joining the conference. This is probably my third year of participation. I appreciate the opportunity to be a panelist. As Sagar mentioned, I'm Sean Egan. I'm the Deputy Director for Labor in our Department of Labor. My primary duties are overseeing my OSHA workers' comp, wage and hour, and the Bureau of Employment Relations, but I've also been leading our department's effort focused in on workplace mental health, where we've sort of identified what we call pillars, three pillars that we focus our work around. One of those being things that are happening in the workplace, things that are affecting the workplace, and then making sure we have connections to individual behavioral health supports. And today we're going to be talking about something that actually covers both of those. And I think our first speaker, Scott, talked a bit about sort of things that come into the workplace and how employers can think differently about the impacts, about the stress, and about how we manage those types of things quite a bit. So we're going to be talking about caregiving and how that's impacting the mental health at our work. And caregiving is a broad term, but it certainly can mean something like we've heard about on the sandwich generation. It can mean just having young kids. It can mean just taking care of older parents. It could be taking care of a spouse or a loved one. And it creates real stress for people in trying to manage that, both the personal side of it, but also managing it within the framework of work and how it kind of is structured and how it goes there. So we have a great panel with us today to help us navigate this issue from both a hands-on in the trenches as well as research. So we're going to start off, if we could just start off with some introductions, and if our panelists could kind of give their organization's role or their own interest in understanding and supporting the caregiving needs of employees or others out there. So we'll start with you, Karen, because I can see you first and foremost.
Thanks, Sean. And thank you for inviting me. My name is Karen Kavanaugh. I am Chief of Strategic Initiatives at the Rosalind Carter Institute for Caregivers. We intentionally changed our name about 3 years ago from caregiving to caregivers to really center the person rather than the tasks of caregiving. The Institute was founded in 1987 by the late former First Lady, Rosalind Carter. And I like to start with her quote that many of you likely already know, but it helps to sort of ground us in the universality of caregiving. And she would say that there are only 4 kinds of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, those who are caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who need them. So it's essentially everybody. The Institute really focuses on systemic change and increasing the sectors that are involved in thinking about those who provide care for someone who's aging, ill, or disabled. We do this through research, convenings, and advocacy. And I lead our Working While Caring initiative and our initiative on profiles and caregiving experiences.
Awesome. Thank you, Karen. Marvell?
Sure. Thanks, Sean. My name's Marvell Adams Jr. I serve as CEO of the Caregiver Action Network, which is a not-for-profit based in Washington, D.C., but with a national reach. Our mission is to support with resources, education, training, and overall awareness raising and advocacy for caregivers, family caregivers across the age spectrum, across the lifespan, and of different lived experiences and backgrounds, and really trying to meet them where they are. So really excited to be a part of the conversation today, because supporting working caregivers, so caregivers that are in the workplace and doing a 9 to 5, 3 to 11, whatever, and then coming home and serving as family and unpaid caregivers as well, is a really important issue for us all. So just glad to be a part of the conversation.
Love it. And last and definitely not least, Leanne.
Thanks, Sean. I'm Nene Lei from the Department of Psychiatry and University of Michigan. I'm a fresh assistant professor here. I and my team have long been interested in aging, dementia, and also related to the questions. One of the most important is caregiving. So we have been interested in to evaluate how the caregiving impacts the healthcare well-being of the adults themselves and also of caregivers. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, we'll kick it off. I think, Marvell, if you wouldn't mind, could you jump in a little more on some of the ways that you believe caregivers need unique supports in the workplace and what maybe some of those you think about might be?
So, our organization, we really do see supporting and meeting caregivers where they are as just a core part of everything we do. And for many of them, that is in the workplace. And so in the same respect that we think of having support groups for different types of lived experiences, different types of affinity groups in the workplace, one way that working caregivers can receive support is through a support group infrastructure or an employee resource group infrastructure. And so one of the things we do is offer a turnkey solution for employers to be able to provide what's really needed for a caregiver friendly workplace, which is one, having a space that caregivers can be recognized for their own self-recognition, but also for others, having a space where supervisors and managers understand their role in supporting caregivers. So whether that means them understanding when someone asks to take the morning off, take their mom to the doctor, that is way more than just one morning off. That is the doctor's appointment that was set up ahead of time. That's the driving, the transportation, the getting mom back home, all the follow-up, and quite frankly, recognizing that that employee, that staff member needs that type of support in order to stay engaged in the workplace. And without that engagement, caregivers are going to burn out and perhaps leave the decision to make to leave the workplace. But in particular, having that unique set of supports and services in place in the workplace really also recognizes that, the days of employers saying leave it at the door are really gone. That you really have to be in a position to accept the holistic version of staff members, and part of that means accepting the fact that they may be family caregivers, and that means they're not just a caregiver when they go home at night. They're a caregiver while they're in the workplace as well. It's just a matter of how do you help them navigate that. And so we talk about those unique circumstances of being able to have more flexibility in their time, making sure it's understood by their supervisors and managers that they are a caregiver and what those responsibilities might include, making sure that they understand what their rights and responsibilities are for asking for accommodations should they need them. I think most importantly, understanding that there are other caregivers in the workplace that they could be connected to through some sort of infrastructure that could help them not only feel that they aren't alone, but being able to build empathetic ears in the workplace that allow them, quite frankly, that the literature shows making them much more likely to be retained within the organization and much more likely to keep the level of productivity that they may be seeking.
Yeah, I love that, Marvell, and I love that statement that caregivers are not just caregivers when they're giving care, right? It's all day long while you're at work. We spend a lot of our time talking about sort of the impacts of stress on your brain and chronic stress long term, and hearing you say that statement just kind of reminds me that too much stress on your brain is not a good thing, and too long of stress on your brain is not a good thing. If you're a caregiver, more than likely you're carrying that all of the time, every day, and is creating sort of a more difficult situation for you. So I love that statement. Leanne, I was curious, you do a lot of research and in the data, what are some of the things, or what's the sort of burden on workforce participation and mental health for those that are caregivers?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. That's a very great question. So like caregivers and also the caregivers, they will have a lot of like work impact on the mental health of their caregivers and also on their labor force participation. For example, there are quite a lot of data that shows that caregivers compared to non-caregivers, caregivers like are more likely to experience some mental health problems such as anxiety, depression, sleeping problems, and also they probably will have more like suicide ideation, especially during COVID. And in addition to that, there will be have quite a lot of work impact on their labor force participation. For example, they might be less likely to be in the workforce, and they might be more likely to work less hours, and also they will have less work productivity. And also they might need some like career promotion opportunities because they have this caregiver responsibilities. So yeah, there are just quite a lot of data that shows that how caregivers might impact their caregivers' mental health and also their labor market performance.
Gotcha. So significant impact, not surprisingly. I think, Karen, in your work, in your organization, I got a two-parter for you, so I'll do my best. But, you know, we've said caregiver probably already about 50 times. And can you kind of give us an idea of what that term means to you? I think for some of us, we're thinking about taking care of kids. And for some of us, we're thinking about taking care of parents. What is it in your work that you see most often that are the types of caregivers you're thinking about? And then what are some of the unique supports that you think people need in the workplace?
So on the first one, RCI really focuses on those who are providing care to someone who is aging, ill, or disabled. So that could include a child if the child has a serious illness, a condition, but it's a bit outside of, I'm going to use air quotes, normal child rearing. Even in the last presentation, as fantastic as that was, there was more conversation about parents and supporting new parents. And during the pandemic, the employers we were speaking with would tell us, we know that there are many employee caregivers, again, those in our workforce who are caring for someone who's aging, ill, or disabled, but they are much more quiet than the parents. So we don't often, we don't always hear from them. We know though that they are struggling. We don't know how to best support them. So, you know, we really think about this with respect to the workplaces. There's still a lot of work to do to normalize this experience within the workplace. This is an experience that is not a one-off. Many people will have this experience once, twice, maybe even in their lifetimes, but it's still very much siloed as, you know, this one-off event that maybe employers need to think about, but, you know, maybe for not too many people within their workforce. But actually 1 in 5 full-time workers in the US is providing care to someone who's aging, ill, or disabled. So it's about 20% of the workplace. So not an insignificant cohort. And if I can, Sean, just kind of like, I'll go into your second question, but I just want to say, Marvel did a fantastic job of sort of like talking about those very specific interventions or supports that employers can think about. So I want to just sort of lift this up a little bit and talk to you about the Working While Caring initiative and engaging directly with employers. Yeah. So we just concluded our first innovation lab with 5 employers in Southeast Michigan, both private and nonprofits. We engage Zingerman's Community of Businesses, Carhartt, Alternatives for Girls, Volunteers for America, Michigan, and Gesher Human Services. So pretty significant number of employees. And while that opening stat in the conversation an hour and a half ago or so about employees not believing that their employers really care about their whole person, I can tell you that with these employers, many of the employers we've talked about, they actually do care. And they really care about this issue. They just don't really know what are the best interventions and what to do. So the Innovation Lab was really designed to elevate the issues of employee caregivers with employers to help to really close the gap on the evidence on what we know about effective employee supports that do two things. One, to keep someone attached to the labor force. That's very important with respect to financial security, access to benefits, healthcare coverage, et cetera, identity. And number two, to reduce the strain of balancing both roles, at least within the workplace. And then to really sort of elevate that public policy or the context of care for employers. They don't likely spend a lot of time, unless they're in this sector, thinking about long-term care and how that is affecting their employees. And what we say to employers is, we can help you to figure out what interventions you might pilot and evaluate with your employers, but you cannot solve for all of the issues stemming from such a dysfunctional and fragmented long-term care system. I even, don't even want to call it that in the US. So over time, can we sort of connect the dots for employers between what they're seeing in their workforce and that broader context of care to organize and engage them as more visible agents for reform?
Yeah, I like that, Karen. I think, and I like the focus on aging. And it seems like, as somebody who's kind of in the sandwich generation, we'll get back to you, Leanne, to talk about that a little bit more, but nobody cares. And that's too broad, but like when you talk about kids, like everybody gets it, right? Like kids are busy, it's hard, there's, they get sick. But when you say like, hey, my parent is having X, like you don't get the same kind of response. And that sounds like that's what you deal with quite a bit.
Yeah, and it's actually also the variability in providing care for someone who's aging, ill, or disabled sort of complicates the ability to design effective supports, right? There's likely no silver bullet, but a suite of different supports. And I think it's important to recognize as well that mostly the adoption, the birth of a child is a joyous occasion. But often, even though people gain significant meaning from providing care, it's often not joyous. Someone is sick.
Yeah.
Seriously ill. Someone's mobility has changed perhaps overnight. And so there's the psychosocial effects of that. There's the workforce effects of that. And so there's the effects of dealing with a very unresponsive system. So while we know that certainly there are psychosocial effects, what I always like to remind us of is to kind of not pathologize the responses that people have when they're providing care to such an unresponsive system.
Gotcha. Well, I appreciate that. Marvell, you gave us like a real quick snapshot of the Caregiver Action Network. Do you want to go just a little bit deeper? And then I'm curious if you have a certain group of caregivers that are more prevalent in your system. And then I could have asked Karen this question as well, but I've heard stories of people having to leave the workforce because they have to do this. And she talked about labor participation. So any thoughts you have around that too, I'd love to hear.
Yeah, certainly. So, on both accords. So when talking about caregivers in the workplace and understanding that not only do they have a need to be supported in a way that is intentionally taking into consideration their caregiving role, but one of the things we do at Caregiver Action Network is really try to be a one-stop shop for at least a starting place or maybe a reconvening place for folks that are episodic caregivers, so they can really have some guidance and referrals and assistance. And so one of the things we offer that's no cost is our caregiver help desk, which if you wonder if you should call it, we usually say to folks, if you're a caregiver, you should call, because really we talk about the entire lifespan. So we want to make sure that we have accessible, effective, and long-reaching resources so that an individual that is 67 years old and then their spouse has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, that individual has support, but also recognizing that a 15-year-old kid that comes home and finds out that their parent has a younger onset Alzheimer's does need support as well, because their after school is going to change dramatically, and so we want to really be able to recognize that there are different lived experiences out there, but having perhaps a similar set of challenges, but they may be unique to their own circumstances. So also recognizing that, excuse me, that, for caregivers to be able to thrive in their own right, they really have to be able to take moments for their own self-care. And we always say to folks is that, just like when you're on a plane, you're going to hear those instructions of, if there's a loss in cabin pressure, make sure to put on your mask before you help somebody next to you, before you help your kid or someone that's along with you. And we really try to implore caregivers to understand that as well. But even beyond all of that, whether you're talking about caregivers in the workplace, caregivers that have left the workplace because they feel that they can't, meet the needs of their loved one, maybe they feel they're alone in that aspect of it, they don't have the support they need, and so they don't have a choice, or their work environment's not conducive to that. People do leave the workforce, and it is one way that we lose individuals and aren't able to retain them. But it's not just, recognizing that someone leaves because they need to take care of their loved one. There are also instances where someone may be a caregiver and going through a really difficult episode. Maybe their loved one is on a new cancer treatment and they are really sticking out through work. Their loved one goes into remission. They feel like their caregiver role is done, but they still end up leaving their workplace because all of those memories and all that difficulty is kind of housed in that relationship with the workforce that didn't make it perhaps easier or at least more accommodating for them. And so they're still holding on to that baggage. And so the last thing I'll say around it is that for everything that we all do, you know, statistically, individuals that are carrying on duties of caregiving, only 50% of the time recognize themselves as a caregiver. And so one of the issues that we really also deal with in our campaign during National Family Caregiver Month this year in November, we're really focused on within the national strategy of self-recognition for caregivers and them understanding that, whether you're mowing a lawn once a week, whether you picked up coffee, for a neighbor, whether you watch the kids, while your friend takes their daughter to the doctor. All of that is kind of a part of this ecosystem of caregiving that we more and more are really relying upon, because the ratio of caregivers available to actually support care recipients is shrinking. So it used to be 7-to-1, now it's down to around 4-to-1. And so you recognize that over and over again, we have to be able to have resources that are flexible and there for caregivers and meeting where there are, but also recognizing that half the time, caregivers don't see themselves as a caregiver. And so they don't reach out for support or hear support as being for them, because they just see, well, I'm the oldest, kid. So I got to be doing this, right? I'm not here to try to have someone give me a handout and help. So recognizing that in that workplace and not having that accommodation or not having that recognition can really lead to burnout in a way that not only is unnecessary, but just leaves us with a even more fractured system.
Yeah, I love you pointing out too that roughly half of people that basically are caregivers don't even recognize that they're caregivers. I think for all of us on this webinar today, that's a conversation we need to have with our friends and family. What I don't know if everybody else has. We went through a grandparent that had Alzheimer's, and grandma was taking care of them for about 10 years. And, we really made it clear to the family that she's going to struggle. In Sean's worldview, like, your brain can't handle that level of stress without support and without people looking out for you, without people engaging with you. So we did pretty well, I think, on kind of making sure she got breaks and all that kind of stuff, but all of us have to be able to have that conversation. So I really appreciate that, Marvell. So Leanne, help me out. I'm in this like sandwich generation where my parents are getting older. They're not like infirmed or anything yet, but they're closing in on it, where I'm around a lot more often than I used to be. And then I still got younger people that are hanging around and taking all my money. So can you talk about what's going on for the sandwich generation and what's maybe unique about that you're seeing?
Yeah, thanks, Jen. So I have been very interested in this special cohort. Like a special subset of caregivers. Like we all talk about like how successful the caregivers could be, but especially for this cohort, sandwich caregivers. So sandwich caregivers, it means there are no like concerns on how to define this. But in general, our research focused on those who were taking care of older parents. So that's like the care for the upper generation. And also they were, at the same time, they were caring for the minor children, like these kids are in the school or maybe like below 6. So that's the care to the upper generation. So they are taking care of the both the upper and lower generation. But if you think about them, so they are like in their 40s, 50s. Like our data shows that about 70% of them are also working. So it's like you think of their time, they are taking care of the kids, and they are taking care of the aging parents, and also they are working. So it is very, very for the time, it's like they just have so much time to work on their job, take care of their older parents and also their kids. So if we look at their mental health, like our data shows that about half of them are reporting substantial emotional difficulties. And also, like you just mentioned, like the kids are eating up your savings. So about 1/4 of them are also reporting the substantial financial difficulties. So yeah, so it's like they are now facing these situations of both jobs, old adult care and also child care, and also they also have very serious mental health problems. They are so stressed out, and also they also have a lot of financial problems. So yeah, this is a cohort that has a lot of stress and needs special attention to. If you think caregivers that are already stressed and have a lot of problems themselves, and in addition to their responsibilities to their loved ones, but if you think of this cohort, they will have much more responsibilities, they have much more stress, and they will also have more financial difficulties. So that's a cohort that needs particular support for this cohort.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think this could apply to anybody that's a caregiver, not just sort of a sandwich generation. I can tell everybody how I feel. It feels like every time I turn around, I have to go do something for somebody else. And I don't have time to prioritize myself. Now, frankly, because I'm such good friends with Sagar and all my friends at the U of M Depression Center, I do make sure that I do prioritize myself, or at least activities that give me a break. But that's how you feel, right? Like every time you don't get, there's no you anymore. You're just here to serve everybody else. And it can be a little bit debilitating. So I'm going to start with you, Leanne. We got a couple of great questions I want to open up for all of you. But the first one was, and anybody's open to kind of jump in here too. But one of our, Bianca asked, I appreciate you sharing the research on the impact of caregiving on mental health at work. Could you all please share any specific books, authors, or articles that we should look for on this topic?
I'm happy to provide links to some of the reports that we have done.
Okay.
One is called Invisible Overtime, that kind of just sort of lays out what we know and don't know about this space. And the second one is a report on our innovation lab that gives you the perspective of 5 employers and how they conceptualized this issue, what they are doing now and what they will be doing, which is designing a navigation program that they will actually share amongst the 5 or 6 employers that will be implemented following design and then evaluated.
And one of the things I can offer, oh, sorry, go ahead, Lan.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm also happy to share like the paper we published and also some other like reports we cited. So that just gives some basic ideas like like the responsibilities the caregivers are handling, and also how to set it up, and also like how to better support them. Thank you.
I just wanted to mention that if you visit our website, caregiveraction.org, there's a whole wealth of knowledge, whether it's from our blueprint for caregivers supporting individuals with mental illness, whether it's a guide of where to start as a new caregiver and 10 tips, as well as recommended reading and other resources, like even just a podcast you could listen to. So yeah, there's a lot of information out there. And so we try to drive people to our website to try to help vet through and cull through some of that.
Marvell, while we got you, somebody asked, could you please provide the call-in number to the caregiver's help desk?
Yes, I can. You know, I should have put it on the screen, huh? So it is, I'll put it, it's 855-227-3640. So you can call that number, but you can also go to caregiveraction.org. And if you're on our website for more than a minute, an actual window will pop up. And that's also our help desk, just asking you if you need any support, not just for the website, but if right then and there through a web chat, you want to share that you're having a tough day mentally and want to talk to someone, one of our trained social workers can take a call from you or talk with you over chat. Or if you even just want to send an email in the middle of the night and get an answer or response the next day, you can do that as well.
Awesome, thank you. We have a similar question from both different venues here, so I'm going to try to amalgamate them, but this is for everybody too. And it's an important one. It's do you have resources for employers to use to help colleagues navigate having these difficult conversations with their peers? And that was from Amy, and Jenna asked very similarly to add on without adding mental or emotional load to the caregiver. So I think the primary question there is, what are some tools or techniques we can use to even have this conversation with somebody?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So, you know, one of the things that we provide is a turnkey, you know, product for employers to help with regularly educating staff and convening, you know, support group sessions. But one of the things you can do, and again, you're welcome to call our help desk or check our website, is we can, depending on where you are, help you navigate local resources for support groups, as well as other ways for engaging. And then on the employer side, we have a section of our website that is dedicated to the types of things that you should be asking of your employer and the types of things your employer should be doing to support you as a caregiver. But, you know, much of it has to do with some of the things we're talking about, starting with listening, understanding what that person's individual needs are and what accommodations can be made, and just always understanding that from your perspective, you are adding value each day to the workplace. And so being able to draw those lines of where you need to have support as a caregiver and where you can give and where you can't is really important.
And I would just add that I appreciate the question and the concern for the additional strain on the person providing care. As we've heard, 50% of people providing care do not identify as such. And it's important to think about also, again, in this space, which is a little bit different from new parents, is stigma. So think about someone who's caring for someone with a mental health condition or a substance use condition. They oftentimes don't want to share all of those details. So really important for employers to be thinking about, like the conversation at the opening of the conference, organizational culture. How are you normalizing this experience within your workforce without necessarily having to know the details of your workforce? How are you elevating perhaps leadership's experience with providing care? How are you telegraphing that, you know, this is an experience that most of us will have, and also, I think it's important to train managers and supervisors in understanding these issues. And then very importantly, we say, giving caregivers, links to websites is not always helpful. That they have that's part of the navigation challenge. So if employers are thinking about this, it's really, really important to also have concrete supports and tools that managers and others can then offer as support to those who are providing care.
Yeah, a great point. And I want to add a little bit because we have there are also some research going on in the University of Michigan that we found that there are some resources outside, but people don't know them and people don't use them. For example, like the Area Agency on Aging or organizations like Marvel. So like people just don't know them. So I think employer workplace could be a good place like to provide some education or any support to about the resources or how to use these resources. That it would be a very, very good place for education purpose, like to see how to help people navigate these resources. So there are some help, but how to use this help. Thank you.
All right. Sorry for that. I think we had a internet problem, and Sean has had to drop away. So I think if there are any further questions, I think most of the questions had been addressed. Just wondering if any of the panelists have any final comments particularly reflecting on any of the points made by our plenary speaker, if there's anything that you thought was particularly relevant that you would want to pass on to managers.
I thought that many of the actions in that last slide were wonderful and really resonate with the research as well as what we've heard from employers and employee caregivers. So I love that. And I particularly like some of the suggestions for small, medium-sized organizations, as well as organizations where there are work operations that can't be done remotely. So thinking about flexibility in a much more creative and thoughtful way. So job sharing, overlapping with teams. It's not always easy to do that, especially in small organizations, but it is a very specific, concrete step that could be at least evaluated.
Thank you very much, Karen. Any other comments, Marvell or Lian Lee?
I really just like the aspect of being able to be empowered as a caregiver to speak up and make yourself known, and understanding that you do have a responsibility and a right to be able to say in the workplace that you are a caregiver and this is a part of your life and it's an important part of it. And so being able to have those open lines of communication and fostering that from an employer standpoint and from a staff member standpoint is really important. So yeah, really good information.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was just thinking, so like employer or managers could be a very good resource to help navigate all the resources outside. So that could be a very supportive resources for the caregivers when they have when they need some particular support. So that because we are always talking about how to educate caregivers how to give them help, but there are resources. It's just not have a good pathway to go to this caregiver. So I think that could be potentially very helpful. And also, if there could be some caregiver groups, then also within the employer. So it's better communication or discussion or anything to share, or peers to share this resources and be very helpful. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We are at the end of time. So I think I want to just add a couple of points of reflection. We heard from our first speaker that we need to think of the whole person. We acknowledged through his talk examples of how we all have roles that go beyond the specific job role that put stress on us, that bring meaning to our lives. And then we followed that by this panel discussion where we talked about what is, one of the most common, if not the most common additional aspect of our lives, which is our various functions as parents or as children of older parents, as caregivers. So I think the other message here is that caregiving has some not only toll, but it also has some resources. And I think we've alluded to a number of these resources. Karen pointed out that there are a number of reports. There are organizations that are entirely devoted to this issue, as Marvell has outlined. And, as has been alluded to and many people have requested, we are going to not only post the slides, but as we have these questions about, what about additional links or other resources, we'll ask each of our presenters to be able to provide some additional stuff which will be distributed afterwards as part of the final package. The other aspect of the whole human is looking after ourselves, right? And looking after ourselves means, if we hold Zoom meetings, try to end them 10 minutes early, okay? If it's a 1 o'clock meeting, don't go 1 o'clock to 1:59 and, try to cram in every last detail. Go to 1:50, and if you run over a couple of minutes, that's fine, but give people at least 5 and preferably 10 minutes. So that's what we're going to do. We gave you 5 after the first talk. We're giving you 10 now. So everyone, be quiet. I mean, I'm talking about the panelists and all that. Get out there, do some jumping jacks, pet your cat, drink some water. I think it's still 75 and sunny, at least around here. 5 minutes of sunshine can do wonders for your mood. Now go out there and do it. See you back in 10 minutes.